Hmm. Hi there, everyone. Wow, those are a lot of shares already. Thank you. Please keep right on sharing. Fantastic job so far. Okay, so Biden's fiscal stance, right? Biden's fiscal stance. Here I am. Thank you for sharing, Dolores, Kay, and Carmen. Hi, Steve. Nice to see you. I see a lot more here, but I'm not sure who you are yet because I don't quite see you, but that's okay. So tonight we're going to talk about Joe Biden's likely fiscal stance. Let's start by sharing an article that appeared in Axios. And the title of it is Team Biden Eyes $1 Trillion January Stimulus. Now, that sounds like a lot, I suppose, looking backward, but looking forward, it doesn't sound like it's really that large a stimulus. But we read in this article by Hans Nichols and Felix Salmon from August 30th of 2020 in Economy and Business. There's a nice photo of Joe Biden in front of some $100 bills. If Joe Biden wins the presidency, he might need $1 trillion stimulus bill in January just to buy enough time to push through his nearly $3 trillion Build Back Better plan later in the spring of 2021. That's according to Biden advisors, who are growing increasingly worried that the economy is deteriorating by the day. Congress and the White House are locked in a stalemate on additional spending to soften the blow of the pandemic. Every day that extra stimulus is delayed only serves to increase the ultimate size of the final cost to the economy, say the authors. And then bullet point 1, economists advising the Biden campaign are privately warning that problems can compound and cascade, including business bankruptcy, supply chain disruptions, mass evictions, and huge shortfalls in state and local budgets. I think the economists advising him are talking true, don't you? And then in the second bullet point, quote, we have always contemplated the need for additional stimulus, Jake Sullivan, a senior policy advisor to Biden, tells Axios, quote, we will confront the situation we find in January, unquote. Well, it's nice to name Jake Sullivan as senior policy advisor to Biden, but who is Jake Sullivan? I don't know. I don't know who Jake Sullivan is. I haven't heard that name before. How important is he? Why is Axios quoting him? I don't know. Between the lines, Biden's signature economic stimulus plan is an ambitious attempt to recover from the pandemic while tackling income inequality, climate change, and structural racism. The plan would pump $2.7 trillion into American manufacturing, clean energy technology, and infrastructure over just 4 years. Now, I must say again something I've said in the past about some of Biden's plans. 2.7 trillion over 4 years isn't even is 450 billion. Is that right? No, I'm sorry. Over 4 years is roughly what 650 billion per year. Not really that large, I don't think. But then, next bullet point, he wants to spend an additional 775 billion for working parents and caregivers over 10 years. That's only an additional 78 billion a year. So we're still talking what, roughly 730 billion over the first 4 years, roughly speaking. That's not enough of a stimulus given how this economy has crashed. Reality check. In a crisis, the most important aspect of any stimulus is speed, getting cash out the door as quickly as possible. Well, Rashida Tlaib and Pramila Jayapal know how to do that. The question is, does Joe Biden and his advisors know how to do it? Bullet point. Even if Democrats win the Senate, Biden's advisors know that it will be difficult to pass such a plan within weeks of the inauguration. Why would it be difficult? That depends on conditions at that time. If the economy is beginning to tank again, which many people, including myself, believe is happening because Congress has provided no further stimulus, no further cushions, no further safety net. In fact, the safety net has been cut off at the knees as of the end of July. We are 1 month into attempts at eviction, foreclosures, and all the bad things that may happen because people no longer have the $600 a week. So why would it be difficult to pass? If the economy crashes over the 4 months, the remaining 4 months, of this year and the rest of January, by the time Biden takes office, we are really going to be in the pits once again. We're going to be back where we were in March and April, of this year. And I don't think Biden's plan is going to heal that with a mere $730 billion a year stimulus. That's not going to make it happen. I think, though, that it's fair to say that the new senators taking office, if the Democrats win the Senate, they're going to be panicked at how the economy is tanking. And Biden and his advisors are going to be able to get whatever they want to get. It will be a situation similar to the one that confronted Obama when he came into office. He could have had anything he wanted, but he limited the amount of the stimulus to $800 billion over 2 years because that was him. He wanted it to be less than $1 trillion. Reportedly, Biden and his advisors know that was too little. And that's what accounted for the slowest recovery we have had in history. And Biden supposedly knows that Obama made a mistake in this and that he had to go bigger and go better. I think he has to go as big as it takes, as big as he can get, and he can get almost anything because the Democrats by that time are not going to be worried about the debt. They're only going to be worried about the unemployment rates and the continuing collapse of the economy. So I think with that worry in the background, and by making sure that everybody in the Democratic Senate reads Stephanie Kelton's book, he'll be able to get whatever it is he wants if he pressures. Next bullet point, our thought bubble. Was this a comic strip? We need a thought bubble. Even Biden is not going to get Congress to spend $300 billion on new batteries before Valentine's Day. Why not? How long did it take Obama to get the ARRA through the Congress? As I recall, it was only a couple of weeks, and it was through, it was done. That would be before Valentine's Day. Seems to me Biden could get Congress to spend that before Valentine's Day. All he's got to do, really, is make sure that the new majority leader of the Senate, who most probably would be Chuck Schumer, will get rid of the filibuster right away. He said he's against the filibuster. He's got to make sure Schumer does it on the first day of organization of the new Senate. And by the way, it looks to me like the Democrats are going to pick up 6 seats in the Senate at least, and they'll have a margin of 53 to 47. I don't think Democratic senators at that time are going to jeopardize their control of the Senate by failing to pass relief very, very quickly. By the numbers, officially, Biden aides are reluctant to commit to a January price tag, given uncertainties about the virus and congressional action this fall. But many economists on his advisory committees privately put it between $1 trillion and $2 trillion, depending on what Congress passes, if it passes anything. Look, whoever the Democratic speaker is going to have control of the House, with most probably an expanded majority over what exists now. Believe me, if we get a further tanking of the economy by the new year, by the time Congress convenes, I don't know whether Pelosi is going to be the speaker anymore, but whoever is the speaker is going to have to commit to delivering what the president-elect wants. If the president-elect wants $2 trillion, he'll be able to get $2 trillion. If he wants $3 trillion, he'll be able to get $3 trillion. If he wants $4 trillion, he'll be able to get $4 trillion. Quote, the goal would be to get money out the door and Americans back to work while keeping families in their homes. Well, judging from what the CARES Act did, you know that's going to be in the neighborhood of 2 to 4 trillion. No 3 trillion. One blueprint already exists. The House passed the $3 trillion CARES Act 2 in May. You mean the HEROES Act. The HEROES Act, that is, not CARES Act 2. But it's not close to becoming law. House and Senate leaders are trillions of dollars apart. But if the Democrats gain control of Senate in January, no Mitch McConnell in the way, they're not going to be trillions of dollars apart anymore. The other side, Trump would also spend big in January, if not before, if he is reelected. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell wants to spend $1 trillion this fall, but he's warned Trump about going much higher. Trump's call for a $2 trillion infrastructure bill back in March would be a starting point for a 2021 stimulus. Trump's not going to win. Trump's not going to win. I'm sorry, even since August 30th and the end of the conventions, Biden's lead is back to where it was before the convention. He is ahead now in most of the swing states. It's even beginning to look like Texas and Florida might go for Biden. It's beginning to look now that Biden might be able to get as much as 385 electoral votes, maybe even more. I think Mitch McConnell is going to be gone as the majority leader of the Senate. I think he's sure to be gone. Trump's call for a $2 trillion infrastructure bill back in March would be a starting point for a 2021 stimulus, if Trump is in, but he's not going to be in. The bottom line, many of Biden's economic advisors served in the Obama administration and know what it's like to inherit an economic crisis on day one. They feel that the 2009 stimulus package, the $787 billion American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the ARRA, was woefully inadequate, and they're determined not to make the same mistake twice. Then don't make it twice. That doesn't mean don't spend only $787 billion. It means don't spend too little. You're better off spending too much. The present situation is much more dire than the one in 2009 was. It just doesn't feel like that yet because we're not losing 700,000 jobs a month. But we may be losing many more than that again, as we were at the beginning of the COVID crisis, as we see an acceleration of the effects of the withdrawal of support by the Congress from people who are out of work and who have no other source of income except for those unemployment checks. So if they're determined not to make the same mistake twice, that doesn't mean don't spend $800 billion, spend $1.6 trillion. That means spend what's necessary to end the depression. Put enough money in so that people are liquid and they can spend what there is to spend on. Anyway, there's an important article that appeared, very important article. In The Intercept, this one was written on September 1st by Jamie Galbraith. It's called Rebuilding the Economy Will Require Joe Biden to Think Very Differently Than 2009. The subtitle is, It is a delusion to think that merely injecting money will bring back the happy mix of jobs and incomes we've lost in the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't think it was such a happy mix of jobs and incomes quite. It seems to me that the unemployment statistics were greatly exaggerated. They were much higher than the stated 3.6%. And of course, wages were low for many, 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 many people. So, there's a picture of Joe Biden. No, I haven't shared this yet for you. Let me share it then for you. There we go. This one's going to take us a long time to get through because it's a comprehensive article, very important and very good. And if you don't know Jamie Galbraith, if you're not into Jamie Galbraith, he arguably is the number one economist in the United States right now. Some may say that it's Stephanie Kelton. Some might say it's Randy Ray. Okay, and some will still say it's Larry Summers. But I think for sheer comprehensiveness of knowledge concerning economic theory and immersion in policy and possible policy, Jamie Galbraith may well be the number one economist in the United States. And by the way, He's square with MMT as well at this point. Joe Biden's invocation of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal in the opening works of his convention acceptance speech offered a flash of hope that in broad terms, the nominee has grasped the scale of the COVID-19 crisis. Yet before Biden even spoke, the head of his transition team, former Senator Ted Kaufman, Biden's successor in the Senate, undercut that hope, telling the Wall Street Journal that in effect, Biden did not mean it. Quote, when we get in, the pantry's going to be bare, unquote, Kaufman said, and quote again, when you see what Trump's done to the deficit, forget about COVID-19. All the deficits that he built with the incredible tax cuts, so we're going to be limited, unquote. After being called out by David Sirota, and we covered that article here, and we covered what Kaufman had to say before here, the Biden campaign split the difference. There will be stimulus in the short run, retrenchment later, said Biden. So Biden's got to be taught no retrenchment, no need for retrenchment. No retrenchment is necessary as long as there is no inflation. Most probably Jerome Powell will tell him that too. Jay Powell will say, wait for inflation before thinking about any retrenchment. Biden will be hearing from a number of different sources that at best the level of the national debt is just a political problem, that it's not a financial problem, that he doesn't have to pull back. Now, hopefully, he might even be hearing from some sources that it doesn't even have to be a political problem if he handles things correctly. The most important thing is to keep control of the Congress. And to keep control of the Congress, he's got to quickly build social credit with the people so people don't dare go against what he wants. He's got to build his approval ratings immediately into the 65 to 70% range within a couple of months. Within a couple of months, he's got to do that. And he's got to do that with very decisive action, overwhelming action at first. Anyway, Jamie says, the reassurance is not reassuring. For like the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force report on which a Democratic platform is based, it confirms the economic thinking on Team Biden, even among its most progressive elements, is essentially the same as that behind the Obama strategy for the previous economic crisis from 2008 to 2009. But the underlying situation now is in many ways much more serious and intractable. And by the way, Jamie wrote a great article in 2008 warning the Obama administration, warning them about what the situation was really like and what they had to do, warning them that they had to go big on the stimulus. They didn't listen then. If some of them still remember, maybe they'll listen to Jamie now. The 2008 crisis was at its core a financial one. It stemmed from a rash of financial frauds, which generated a simulacrum of economic growth through mortgage loans that would never be honored in full and that were designed and targeted to ensure they could never be honored in full. When the frauds were exposed and the housing market collapsed, millions lost their jobs, millions more lost their homes. Still, overall and over time, the crisis was amenable to the conventional, quote, Keynesian, unquote, fix, a large injection of money. The residual arguments over the Obama-Biden program in 2008 are merely over whether the injection was large enough and whether a larger one might have averted the political backlash that hit the administration in 2010. Not might have, would have. Like, for example, if they'd spent on H.R. 676, Medicare for All back then, and if they put together a $1.8 trillion stimulus bill, Obama Biden would have been heroes in the run up to the election of 2010. The Republicans would have stood no chance. Remarkably, although the recovery was slow, and neither the labor force nor home ownership ever returned to pre-crisis levels, the United States was able to sustain an economic expansion after 2010. The position of the country was helped by an unexpected surge in low-cost natural gas and high-cost oil production. The expansion was continued in the first 3 years of Donald Trump's term by large tax cuts weighted to the wealthy and a booming stock market, the, quote, everything bubble, unquote, as it is sometimes called. The jobs created, it is true, were mainly at relatively low wages. Nevertheless, they were created. The U.S. returned to full employment, conventionally defined, by around 2018, the slowest recovery in history. The slowest recovery in history. The crash started in 2008. It was a lost decade before we returned to full employment. This fact, says Jamie, a slow motion success story, no doubt bolsters the confidence now of those who set the policy back then. That would be unfortunate, and only because they never admitted to themselves that they muffed it, that they blew it, that they created the worst recovery in history. Slow motion recovery. The long expansion relied very heavily on the consumer, not on business investment. While personal consumption had been the source of the pre-crisis boom and fell sharply in the slump, its share of gross domestic product recovered after early 2015 and remained throughout well above levels of any previous post-war epoch. Total business investment, on the other hand, never returned to pre-crisis levels as a share of GDP and was at the peak in 2015, almost 200 percentage points below the previous peak in 2005, in part because the digital revolution reduced the cost of capital equipment and cut into the brick and mortar needs of the business sector. Government spending rose sharply in the slump and remained historically high, but as a share of GDP, it declined continuously from the start of the expansion until 2020. So are you reading this? Government spending as a percent of GDP declined continuously from the start of the expansion until 2020. It was only high in absolute numbers, but it was low as a percent of GDP. Too low, much too low. Thus, consumer spending was the main sustaining factor for the 5 final years until the pandemic hit. There are 3 reasons why the experience of the last expansion will not be repeated now. First, the pandemic has obliterated the global market for many advanced capital goods in which America excels. Aircraft are a major example. The civil aviation industry depends on worldwide demand, not on U.S. demand. And world demand is dead so long as more airworthy planes are parked on the ground than are in the air. I hope you're catching that, Sarah Nelson. In a slightly different vein, the U.S. oil business turns on a world price. It is doomed so long as the selling price is half the cost of getting fracked oil from the ground in West Texas. Does everybody have that? Oil is not coming back because the selling price is half the cost of getting fracked oil. They won't be fracking much because the cost of it is too high. They can't make a profit. Construction of offices, and that's good, by the way, construction of offices and retail malls, also dead and done as a substantial share of clerical work shifts to the home office and of shopping to online distributors. The sale, hello, Amazon. Hello, somebody, Bezos. The sale of automobiles will slow as commuting and shopping demand fewer miles of travel, and cars therefore last longer. In many other sectors, cheap but digital equipment will replace expensive facilities and human labor. Overall, the next recovery will not be kickstarted by exports, by business investment, or by the purchases of durable consumer goods. There is nothing that Keynesian stimulus can do about that. When we come to the consumer, there is even a bigger problem. It is that the largest share of increased spending in the last recovery and the secret of American success at job creation was not in the purchase of goods, but in the production and consumption of services. The U.S. economy after the crisis saw a vast growth in jobs, in bars, restaurants, coffee houses, hotels, resorts, spas and casinos, gyms, ride shares, in massage and tattoo parlors, hair and nail salons, boutique shops, and high-end grocery stores, as well as in childcare, education, cultural events, and elective medical procedures. The entire panoply of services with which a wealthy society tends to pamper itself. In effect, the U.S. economy became a gigantic carnival of doing each other's washing and scratching each other's backs. The pandemic has washed much of that away. Direct personal contact, crowded spaces, and mixing are the essence of many services and have been suppressed necessarily for health reasons and will remain. There is an assumption in many quarters that if and when the pandemic recedes, these will simply return and things will start up where they left off. This is neither a safe assumption nor even a reasonable one, says Jamie. Back when most spending at the margin was for goods produced in American factories, the simple provision of money could flip the switch that got things going. Customers placed orders, businesses hired workers, and the engine started up. In an economy in which domestic spending is overwhelmingly directed at services, the jobs will not return until the customers collectively are willing to buy the services that they themselves collectively provide, but they will not be willing until they have the jobs, which depend on the prior presence of customers. This is a classic catch-22. It is precisely the dynamic, the virtuous circle of self-reinforcing demand that the pandemic has obstructed and will continue to obstruct. Isn't this a brilliant article, folks? Isn't this a brilliant piece of work? Even when the threat of the virus recedes, if it does recede, these services will not return easily for a more basic reason. They're generally not essential. They're add-ons that grew up with our wealth, and most Americans can, by and large, do without them. Our households in the middle class and up our American households in the middle class and up live in houses, the byproduct of post-war policies of suburbanization and home ownership. If they have to, people who live in houses can cook, clean, and entertain themselves at home. In recent years, the economy grew by persuading them to leave home, to go out, to buy food, get exercise, and have fun on the market. The economy can and will retreat along the same lines as families with income decide to spend less and save more, while those without incomes cut back on everything because they have to. It will retreat along those lines, at least until the uncertainties of the pandemic start to recede. But the uncertainties can't recede so long as people who provide all those services do not first experience a sustained improvement in their prospect for jobs. And there, once again, is the catch. The firms that provide the jobs cannot survive these conditions indefinitely. Service businesses generally operate with fixed costs, including rent and interest, that demand a high level of customer pass-through. Bars must be packed, restaurants full and noisy on the weekends, concerts sold out, or the businesses behind them cannot be sustained. The combination of public health restrictions on their capacity with high household savings and low patronage driven by economic insecurity is lethal to their prospects. A New York Times survey shows a fall-off in August of almost 25% in visits to businesses compared to 2019, even though incomes have been kept up by the relief programs. How long businesses can hold out is anyone's guess, but many have given up already and many more will follow. And once a commercial strip or mall or neighborhood begins to go dark, blight weighs on the survivors. This is something we can see all around us right now. Third, as the pandemic lingers and people cannot work, then we have arrears for rent, mortgages, and utility bills are piling up. According to one survey, about a third of households, failed to make their full rent or mortgage payment in July for the fourth month in a row. Landlords have begun again to file for evictions, understandably from their point of view, but disastrously for the economy as a whole. As the fear of eviction or foreclosure returns, households will save even more and spend even less. He's outlining a downward spiral of the economy continuing into the new year. They will save even more and spend even less, hoping to have enough in reserve in case of bad luck or sustained joblessness to keep the bailiff from the door. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed our economy for the long term. The changes are due to our advanced technology, not our backwardness, to our wealth, not our poverty, to our past access to credit, and therefore to our fixed commitments in relation to current incomes, to our houses and suburbs and cars, and to the fact that we have had and still have an affluent society. The decision by millions of anxious Americans, each acting in their own best interest, to eat and play at home, to save more and spend less, to protect their health and to hang on for as long as possible, creates an economic problem that cannot be palliated by money alone. This is not the post-war America of competitive consumerism and pent-up demand on which the magic of Maynard Keynes worked so well. The point of all the measures taken in April, the CARES Act, with extended unemployment benefits, payroll protection, small business loans, and direct payments to tax filers, and the Federal Reserve's moves, was to buy time for social distancing and other measures to bring COVID-19 under control. The assumption was that the economy would then recover on its own. Even though the public health measures did not work, the funds did buy time for American households to pay rent, mortgages, utility bills, and as it turned out, to put something aside for the summer and fall. They kept the country from falling apart as the pandemic spread. A new round of income supports can, of course, buy more time and is indeed urgent right now. But it will not by itself set the economy on a path towards renewed growth and high employment. Something else must be done, going far beyond mere money, or else it's depression all the way down. The outlines of that something else are only just coming into view. Some of the basic elements are the following. 1. The sectors producing advanced capital goods for world markets, energy for domestic use, weapons, and the construction center must be mobilized as if in a wartime effort to a new set of purposes. These should aim at sustainable energy, the mitigation of climate change, public health, and the reconstruction of life itself around safe and sustainable patterns of activity. Renewed infrastructure of all types, new transportation systems, new amenities, natural conservation, and cultural investments are all part of this challenge. The Green New Deal is now doubly necessary, not only to transform the energy basis of the economy, but also to ensure that there is an economy to be transformed. And what Green New Deal? What Green New Deal? I submit the Green New Deal, not from Wikipedia, the Green New Deal is specified in Bernie Sanders' platform that he ran on. That has all the elements Jamie just mentioned. Item 2 in this list. For the many millions who cannot find jobs in the private sector, there must be a job guarantee for all seeking to work at a modest living wage in the public sector. It may be modest, Jamie, but the emphasis has to be on living. It has to be a real living wage in the public sector. The pandemic has cut not only services jobs, but also office jobs and construction, so that now nearly 40 million American workers have been displaced. Many will not be called back even if their employers survive. Yet there is work enough for everyone in teaching and caring, in public health, in parks and libraries, in art and culture, in maintaining our communities, and in providing food and housing and other basic services to those in need. And if the jobs are made available, people will sign up for them by the millions. 3, service providers must be restructured so they can be sustained at reduced volumes. They must get loans on easy terms to reconfigure their physical layout to protect both customers and workers. But they also need assistance in meeting their costs. Cooperative, private, public ownership, and partial municipalization of service firms with local government getting support from the federal government is one promising path. In Germany, small businesses got a share of their costs covered by their localities and so can survive, whereas in the U.S., they are failing. So, service providers must be restructured. They need loans on easy terms. They need assistance in meeting their costs. There has to be cooperative, private-public ownership and partial municipalization of service firms. Where have you heard that before? I don't think you have heard that before. That's a new suggestion coming from Jamie's international perspective and what they've done in Germany. 4, manufacturing capacity sufficient to meet the basic requirements of public health and sustenance must be rebuilt on domestic soil so as to be immune from the disruptions to trade associated with the pandemic or other threats to global supply chains. We cannot be caught again, as we were this spring and summer, unable to provide basic protective equipment to healthcare workers and indeed to the whole population. For this purpose, a new structure of financing will be required, a health finance corporation along the lines of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation that operated from 1932 to 1956 and brought us through the New Deal and part of the post-war period, by the way, just to add. Number 5, public health must be reconstructed, accessible to all at no out-of-pocket cost. This call goes beyond the conventional discussion of public options and single-payer schemes to recognize that COVID-19 has created a financial crisis for America's healthcare sector. Like everything else in America, healthcare is a business, and as the economy has fallen, reducing accidents and other infectious diseases, and as elective procedures have been postponed, providers are seeing fewer people so that, like every other form of business, many hospitals and clinics cannot cover their costs. The solution is to make the healthcare sector cooperative to assure that appropriate services are available to all. Indeed, Spain and Ireland nationalized all healthcare services in their pandemic. The United States could do the same or find a less drastic solution. There may be less drastic ones, but the point is, it has to be made cooperative so appropriate services are available to all. If that requires nationalization, that's fine. If we can do it as something less, okay, the nationalization, but just with a network of cooperatives, community healthcare services, then fine. But we've got to do it. He's right. We've got to do it. There have to be these services for everyone. For everyone. 6, for the duration and beyond, renters and mortgage holders must be shielded from evictions, foreclosures, and utility stoppages consistent with good behavior supervised by local authorities, and there must be reasonable facilities to write down unpayable debts along with reasonable compensation to small landlords. Student debt and medical debt are also good candidates for general relief. Are we talking about Bernie's platform or not? Ultimately, since these debts are also the assets of those who lent the money, the reality is that a successful economy after COVID-19 requires a redistribution of financial wealth. He's not talking about income now, he's talking about wealth. If the pandemic is to be defeated, and if a viable social order is to emerge in the aftermath, the balance sheets of American households will have to be rewritten to carry a burden of debt that is manageable, given less market activity and lower market incomes. This means that the assets of the wealthy, as well as the debts of the overburdened, will have to be written down. There must be a general redistribution from creditors to debtors, reversing the trend of the last 40 years. A jubilee. That's what he's talking about. A jubilee. He says the redistribution, by the way, will occur. It can be done through a decade of depression, as in the 1930s, or 2 decades of inflation, as in the 1960s, or it can be done by sensible restructuring and debt relief, as was done in the immediate aftermath of World War II. 8, finally, with a widespread write-down of debts and assets, the financial sector must be restructured, since that sector holds many of the assets that will lose value. The ultimate financial consequences of this pandemic are not yet clear, and where the weak points of the financial system will emerge is still somewhat obscure. But it is certain that those weak points exist, and when they are exposed, they will prove profound. The big banks that cannot make it can be taken over and run as public utilities. This can be done under present law. Necessary payments, savings, and credit functions can be sustained by providing public options through postal banking and a public electronic payment system managed by the Fed. Over time, the regional and local banks can be supported to build a new economy in place of the one that Wall Street distorted and ultimately helped to destroy. No spirit of radicalism animates these ideas. They're not driven by ideology nor by any past commitment to any agenda. They follow, says Jamie, as matters of logic and fact from an understanding of this situation. The previous structure of the American economy was highly efficient in some ways. It supported, although unequally, a high living standard for a very large part of the population. But circumstances have changed in ways that cannot be controlled or reversed and will not evaporate on their own. Whatever happens to the virus and the pandemic, it is therefore a delusion to think that markets will restore us to well-being on their own. It is a delusion to think that the mere injection of money, however great and generous, and however needed for the short run, will bring back the happy mix of jobs and incomes we've just lost. Again, I don't think it was so happy, but here it is. It is a delusion to think that the easy methods of the post-war economists, whose ideas have dominated liberal thought and response to economic crises for 70 years now, will work in the face of the COVID-19 challenge. The path forward requires planning and action on a far larger scale. It requires skills It requires imagination, local knowledge, commitment, and mobilization that resemble but actually surpass those brought to bear in the New Deal. The only good news is that other unprecedented crises have happened before. In most cases, the result has been a disaster. But there are a few moments in American history when the country rallied to do what was necessary, overcoming the odds, the powers, the old ideas, and the bad actors who stood in the way. It did so in 1861, in 1933, and in 1942. And here we are again. Biden was right to invoke Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. However, America needs for him to mean it. And what I can recommend here is that Biden use this as his inaugural address. Use this. But after saying, and here we are again, then invoke Franklin Roosevelt and call for us to meet the challenges as we did in 1861 and 1933 and in 1942, and call for the Green New Deal. We need him to mean it. We need him to stand up for Medicare for all and for the Green New Deal and for the elimination of student debt and for a just transition to a new structure for society. That is what Jamie is calling for here. And it's in the best tradition of the American left as well. So that's what I think of this great article. I will now stop sharing it, and I will move on to the next one, which I believe will probably be the last one for today. I could talk a lot more about a lot of other things, but we are beginning to run short of time. Let me share the screen for you once again. So this next one is an article by Russell Markheimer. I think he pronounces it that way, but I'm not sure because I never met Russell. But he has long been associated with the single-payer movement. This was published by the Crime Reporter on September 8th, today. It's from Common Dreams, and it says Trump, Biden, and a possible October single-payer surprise. And there is a picture of National Nurses United, of course. Love it, improve it, Medicare for all, from their rally outside of the national headquarters of the Pharmaceutical Association, in support of Medicare for all. Russell says, the race for president in 2020 is looking a lot like the race in 2016. Donald Trump is facing another corporate Democrat, Joe Biden, who does not support single-payer Medicare for all. The race is tight in the swing states where it counts. Well, it's not as tight as it was a few days ago, but... And into the stretch run, Trump once again looking to position himself as a populist. Last month, the New York Times ran an article with the header, quote, Trump says he'll look into a pardon for Edward Snowden. The remarks seem to be a shift for Trump, who repeatedly called Mr. Snowden a, quote, traitor, unquote, unquote, spy who should be executed, unquote, in the years before his election. Will Trump pull a single-payer card? The president has long had what the Washington Post in 2007 called, quote, Trump's forbidden love, single-payer health care, unquote. The Post pointed out that in 2000, Trump advocated for it as both a potential Reform Party presidential candidate and in his book, The America We Deserve. Quote from the Donald, "We must have universal health care. Just imagine the improved quality of life for our society as a whole," unquote, he wrote. Quote again, "The Canadian-style single-payer system in which all payments for medical care are made to a single agency, as opposed to the large number of HMOs and insurance companies with their diverse rules, claim forms, and deductibles, helps Canadians live longer and healthier than Americans." Trump told us the truth in his book. And just before the 2016 campaign, Trump appeared on David Letterman's show and held up Scotland's socialized system as the ideal. "A friend of mine was in Scotland recently," quote unquote, from Trump. He said to Letterman, quote again, "He got very, very sick. They took him by ambulance, and he was there for 4 days. He was really in trouble, and they released him, and he said, quote, 'Where do I pay?' unquote. And they said, quote, 'There's no charge,' unquote. Not only that, he said it was like great doctors, great care. I mean, we could have a great system in this country," unquote. With Biden opposed to single payer, what is keeping Trump from pulling an October surprise? What is keeping Trump from, along with pardoning Snowden, signaling to voters in the swing states in the Midwest that he supports a system where every citizen is given a Medicare card at birth, cradle to grave coverage? Nothing, says Russell. Isaac Lieberman is a nurse in Los Angeles, a single-payer Bernie Sanders supporter, and a California Democratic Party activist. Quote, "As a recent Democratic National Committee delegate to the convention this past week for Bernie Sanders, I did my utmost through the entire week to communicate the danger to the DNC and to as many Biden delegates as I could that single-payer Medicare for all is probably the single most popular issue in the country," Lieberman told the Single Payer Action podcast with Russell Muckheiber. So that's where Russell got this. Quote, 88% of Democrats support it. Over 70% of the American public supports it. Even a majority of Republicans support it, unquote, end quote. And it sounds as though the Biden campaign and the DNC is enormously confident because of the polls leading into the convention that Biden is going to beat Trump easily. Quote again, "But I was reminding people that if Biden continues to run publicly opposing that which the majority of all Americans and nearly 90% of our party supports, how easy would it be for Trump to come in at the last minute with his October surprise and promote Medicare for all," unquote. He could easily pull whatever small percentage he needs to shave off in the swing states to snag another 4 years for his neo-fascist gangster policies in the White House, unquote. Quote, "I fear for our country in many ways if Trump continues in office," unquote, said Lieberman. Quote, "Unfortunately, I'm also convinced that many of the top leadership of the Democratic Party, although they attack Trump in any way they can think of, would much prefer another 4 years of Trump rather than having a true FDR-style progressive in the White House like Bernie Sanders or even Elizabeth Warren, who, of course, Mr. Lieberman, is not a true FDR-style progressive." Why would even the DNC Platform Committee reject single payer? Quote, "It's plain that the leadership of the Democratic Party would rather have 4 more years of Trump than Bernie," said Lieberman, "but with the only 2 options being Trump and Biden, I can't for the life of me figure out why they voted down Medicare for all," unquote. Although, as I'm thinking about it now, when I went to the California Democratic Party conventions back before the pandemic, you went into this large hall. There's probably a 3-story tall stage with the chair of the party and the rest of the elites elevated above everyone else. And flanking this huge stage are lighted billboards for advertising. And most of the time I'm in that convention hall, I notice the ads flashing on these billboards are coming from Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and other insurance companies like Cigna. All those companies that stand to lose their grip on power and billions when we establish single payer, unquote. Quote, so perhaps enough of the delegates who made it to the platform committee are beholden to the endless flow of money coming from those industries. They know which side their personal bread is buttered on, and that's the side they will stand on, unquote. And that's why we need a new party like the Movement for a People's Party. Lieberman said he agreed with Ralph Nader. And by the way, supporting the Movement for a People's Party will not require not voting for Biden in the choice between Biden and Trump, because the Movement for a People's Party isn't running any candidates this time around. They'll start doing that in 2022. So Lieberman said he agreed with Ralph Nader that whoever wins the presidential election, the single-payer movement needs to mobilize around frontline COVID-19 workers to energize the movement. These COVID-19 workers cannot be stared down or flim-flammed, Nader wrote in June, quote, they have the decisive karma that veterans groups often have with Congress. They have seen more fatalities among their protectees in 3 months than the U.S. soldiers lost in the Korean and Vietnam wars. Apart from the massive greater casualties on the native peoples, they have experienced the staggering pressures of their hands-on services from ambulances to intubations and the solitary deaths of their patients. While members of Congress huddle at home, they are shamed by the low-paid, valiant toil of exposed grocery, public transit, and sanitation workers who don't have the luxury of laboring remotely, unquote. Quote, this new unstoppable nonpartisan assemblage of Americans will have plenty of backup, unquote, Nader wrote. Quote again, funding by well-to-do people will be forthcoming, unquote. Quote, Nader hit the nail on the head, unquote, said Mr. Lieberman. And quote again, I love the way Ralph Nader pointed out the first responders, sanitation workers, and grocery store workers, and everybody who was out there who was forced to survive on the front lines, risking their lives during the pandemic. It's a beautiful comparison to the veterans of wars who come back from war and speak out against it. They carry moral authority, unquote. I think they do. I think that point is very, very well made. You see here at the bottom that Russell is the editor of the Washington, D.C.-based Corporate Crime, the reporter. He's also founder of SinglePayerAction.org and editor of the website, the Morgan County USA website. He's also a fairly close associate of Kevin Zeese, the late Kevin Zeese, who died just a few days ago. Also, of Margaret Flowers, Kevin's partner, as well. So Russell must be grieving about now, I think. Anyway, that article about single payer matches very well to the other two articles I discussed this evening. There are going to be strong calls for single payer now. And there is a chance that one of Trump's October surprises, and he will have a number of them trying to distract people, will be a claim that if he is reelected, he will give to the American people Medicare for all. He's likely to gamble on that. He doesn't want to lose. He will do whatever he has to stop from losing. So what is Biden going to do? Is Biden going to sit there and let Trump preempt him with respect to single-payer health care? That is ridiculous. He needs to come out right now for Medicare for all. And he needs to stop the baloney sausage about cost. We will not spend more when we transition to Medicare for all. We will spend less. We will go down from 18% of GDP spent on healthcare to something like 12 or 11% of GDP or lower spent on healthcare when we move to Medicare for all. Biden has to start telling people that. He has to start telling people not to be afraid of Medicare for all. They'll be able to go to any doctor they want to go to. That statement won't, of course, be true in every single case, but it will be true in 99% of the cases. Because there aren't many doctors that can afford to go into a concierge business. They will have to take the patients coming to them who will only be able to pay them through Medicare. They'll have to take it. There won't be another major source of revenue. That's the reality. So for most of us people who are out there, the doctors we go to now are going to be the doctors we will go to then after the transition. People need to be told that. It needs to be made clear. Biden needs to come out for Medicare for all. And he needs to make clear that he's going to pass whatever stimulus is necessary to transition the economy in the way Jamie Galbraith is talking about. In fact, a very good candidate for Secretary of Treasury in the Biden administration is Jamie Galbraith. Biden needs to leave his Obama advisors behind. They are not the people to meet this crisis. They are not the people to meet this crisis. He has to bring in Jamie and Stephanie Kelton, and Pavlina Chernyeva and Randy Ray. He needs to bring in a cast of MMT characters in order to support him, because they know what to do on the economic side of the economy. They will do what is necessary, and we can see that from Jamie's article. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. Oh, I forgot to share the other article. The link, though, is in the description. The links to these articles, are in the description. So you've got them. There's not a problem about that. I'm now going to shift to your comments. Carmen says, Alice Little, not true. Our currency is backed by real resources, such as, I didn't get the early comments that actually motivated this statement of Carmen's, but Carmen is answering the economist, Alice Little. Okay, Alice Little is is not, an MMT economist, but she knows a lot of economics. She says, Alice Little, not true. Our currency is backed by real resources such as land, labor. Okay, and also raw materials. I don't think that's quite right, Carmen. Our currency is backed. I don't know in what sense it's backed. I don't think it's backed. I prefer to say that our currency is driven by taxation, and as a result of taxation, by general use of the currency and the need to use it to create and support the real economy, a gigantic real economy that unfortunately has been shrinking due to COVID. And Matt says, are we talking about the same Joe Biden that the DNC, following the lead of big donors, installed to kill big social spender Bernie Sanders? Okay, Matt, let's remember. Let's project ourselves back to 1932 and ask, are we talking about the same Franklin Roosevelt who was promising us a balanced budget, who was promising us fiscal responsibility, and who is talking against Herbert Hoover for Herbert Hoover's having deficits? Are we talking about the same person? I just had to say that. You don't know. We can't know. We can't know exactly what a president will do when he's confronted with horror. That goes for Obama too. There were some people who thought he was going to go the way, of Bob Rubin, the way Bob Rubin wanted him to go. And that is the way he went. It turned out they were right. But in the end, it was up to Obama's decisions. What if he had said to Harry Reid, no filibuster, Harry. We got to get rid of the filibuster right now. You organize on the first day, you get rid of the filibuster. I don't want to hear any more about that. It's going to stand in the way of my saving the economy, and I got to save the economy. And what if he had then gone and taken the advice of Christine, her last name escapes me. She was on the National Council. It's National Council. And she advised a $1.8 trillion Recovery Act. I mean, Obama, in that space of time, he was totally free to pass that bill, which would immediately have lent him a huge amount of social credit. He was perfectly free to have passed H.R. 676 right then. If he had passed those two bills, he's a hero by the fall of 2009. What could the oligarchs do against him? Not contribute to his campaign in 2012? Who would have needed their money then? He could have raised easily $1 billion from grassroots. He didn't have to do what he did. It was up to him. It was up to his psychology. It was up to what he really believed. Joe Biden is an old man. He is old enough to remember the post-war period when Franklin Roosevelt was still a hero, old enough to have read the histories. He did not follow that course in his career. That is quite true. But he remembers. It's in the DNA he was brought up in. Alice says, right, Carmen, I was just referring to it being tied to something tangible that the average citizen can understand. It's difficult to match what money is tied to when it's every single thing. Absolutely, Alice. Carmen says, that's him. Jim Bird said, who's him? Because if either candidate gets control of both houses, we're SOL. Alice says, I'm still very tempted to write in Sanders, but I cannot. Alice, if you're in a safe state, you can write in Sanders or do whatever you want. If Biden goes into the election with a 15-point lead in your state, it won't really matter what you do. So do what your conscience tells you to do. If your conscience tells you to write in Bernie, go ahead and write in Bernie. Matt says Obama, Biden are Republicans. I was just talking to Bonnie, a little early this evening, and we were talking about something brought up. Oh, I know what it was. One of our friends living in our building just died, and they had a little display for him in front. He was a lawyer as a professional, and in 1969 he was admitted to the bar in the Supreme Court, which, if I remember correctly, was still the Warren Court. Earl Warren, of course, was a Republican. His court was the most progressive Supreme Court, of all in history. Warren's court. Warren was the Republican governor of California. There was a time when Republicans were progressive. Some Republicans, when the party was split, just as the Democratic Party was split. Warren was a candidate for president in 1952. He ran against Eisenhower, who ran, of course, as a modern Republican, as one who was vaguely progressive, but was not anti-Social Security, didn't want to get rid of the safety net, at all, and expanded it somewhat. As we know, he was a balanced budget type. But there were Republicans that were progressive at that time. Jacob Javits, senator from New York. Republicans could bring themselves to be progressive. The country is facing a national emergency. If you read Jamie Galbraith's article, he says at the end what he's suggesting doesn't come from ideology. It doesn't come from any previous agenda. He's saying it comes from our present situation. Look at the common sense of it, he's saying to Joe Biden. And he is talking to Joe Biden. He is talking to Joe Biden. Joe Biden's chief economist in the Obama-Biden period was Jared Bernstein. And Jared Bernstein goes to Jamie Galbraith's Economists for Peace and Security conferences. But Jamie used to be the head, of Economists for Peace and Security. Then Jamie retired as the head, but of course is still an elder statesman of the organization. Who do you suppose Jamie's successor was as the head of Economists for Peace and Security? Stephanie Kelton was his hand-picked selection as his successor. And Jared Bernstein came just as he had come to Jamie's conferences. He came to Stephanie's conferences. He listens to them. I'm not saying he agrees with them or totally agrees with them, but he has a certain amount of sympathy for their points of view. He likes to be a reasonable man. He's not a Republican. He comes over as a progressive Democrat. Not quite an MMTer yet, but maybe getting pretty close. He's been talking to Stephanie for years now. Kay says Biden at least doesn't want to kill Social Security, Jim. He didn't want to kill Social Security, Kay, but during the Obama-Biden period, he tried to cut it, and he tried to cut it on a number of occasions. He doesn't want to get rid of it. Right. Barbara Wernick says, right. Could have been heroes, took the low road. Took the low road, right. Maybe Biden won't take the low road this time. He's an old man. What has he got to lose? Evelina says, Aristotle actually a good thing, but they tie it to a deficit that isn't even real. I like the way they keep saying ever so blithely the pantry is bare. They don't care. Biden didn't say the pantry is bare. That was Ted Kaufman. That's not necessarily what Biden thinks. Aristotle says, and I take Trump very seriously when he says he intends to erase Social Security. It's no compassion or mercy, and he will do it. He will do it if he thinks it's going to benefit him. He will not do it if he doesn't think it's going to benefit him. But I take him very seriously, and I think everybody over 65 ought to vote against Trump, if for nothing else, just for that. That he would likely erase Social Security if he thought he could gain by erasing Social Security. And Kay says, yep, I agree, Alice. And Alice says, my biggest beef with government propping up obsolete businesses, that is not free enterprise. Alice, I got news for you. If the government actually props up any business, that is not free enterprise either. I do agree that propping up obsolete businesses is a bad idea. Kill the businesses, provide people a job guarantee instead to tide them over until they can go into a new business. That's it. If the business is obsolete, yeah, get rid of the business. That's the best thing to do economically. The health insurance companies are obsolete. We've been propping them up for years and years and years and years and years, refusing to pass Medicare for all, paying a horrible price in fatalities. I estimated myself that during the 7 years of the Obama administration, from 2010 to 2016, that we lost 356,000 people because they did not have insurance under the Affordable Care Act. Obama-Biden's failure to pass H.R. 676 in 2009 cost us 356,000 deaths over that period. I think that not passing that was criminal. And it was propping up obsolete businesses. And it wasn't free enterprise. And Matt says it was worse than that. Big banks were insolvent and through criminal activity destroyed the wealth of millions of Americans. Obama-Biden bailed them out and kept them out of jail and watched millions lose their homes. Absolutely, they did. Steve says, I don't understand why Republicans want austerity. It only keeps the economy down, the people hurting. Because it's not solely about the economy for them. It's about power. It's about having power. They like it because they like the power. They want people to bow and scrape to them. That's what they want. They love it when they made a lot of money and they go into venture capital. And then they have brilliant people with the ideas come to them and beg them for capital. They love that. They love that. And then they tell the folks, sure, we'll give you some capital. Just give us half the business. Evelina says, sorry, folks, the pantry is bare. It is what it is because I say so. So fecking callous and no vision. Alice says, you remember one single individual went to jail for the 2008 mortgage crisis. And Alice says, I need to dump my Conoco, BP, and Exxon stocks. That's a good idea. Matt says, Evelina Ponte, seriously, this is the big, inspiring vision that is going to boldly lead us into the future. Kay says, come on now. 4 times. I meant SS. I meant SS, okay, in Medicare. He will destroy us. You're talking Biden. Al says, can't decide if I should buy another 100K of Apple. I have over 400 now. Tesla overpriced. Amazon is $3,000 a share. It's probably overpriced too, though it may go up a little. Carmen says, desperate plays. If workers are doing well, they won't take shit jobs, paying shit wages without any benefits to fall back on. Kay says, Alice, they already took Exxon off the market. Jim says, Kay Clark, Ryan, Social Security is in trouble with either party in charge of the last administration to cut SS with the Obama-Biden administration. If you're not making ends meet, it's a slow death. The House divided and gridlock is our only hope. No. We don't want a House divided. We want the possibility of pressuring the Democratic Party to deliver. The House divided always gives them an excuse to screw us by holding hands with the Republicans in bipartisan corrupt deals. That's what they have used for years to evade responsibility for terrible things happening. You have to give them both houses of Congress, and then you have to hold them accountable if they fail to deliver. We did not hold Obama truly accountable. In 2012, we did not hold him accountable. People were still too enamored, too taken with the idea that they had elected the first black person in 2008. Evelina says, the giving farmers money and satisfying select interest groups. Alice says, those are all torpedoed. Every that you are mentioned, don't see them coming back quickly. We have so much of that ridiculous pampered shopper BS. We do. Evelina says, looks like it, doesn't it? Avril says, Carmen actually, desperation pays. Keep workers desperate to arm twist them into taking shit jobs, paying shit wages, and no benefits during a pandemic with a high likelihood they'll die for the DIW. Barbara says, buy up Wall Street. Remind me what DIW is or DLW, whatever it is, Carmen. Barbara says, buy up Wall Street. It's all this government cares about. You're safe. Carmen says, Dow correction. Oh, the Dow. Evelina says, brilliant article. Alice says, can you explain what that means? I know they're downsizing substantially, but my Exxon stock still shows $38 a share. Yeah, probably because even though Exxon is off the market, but right now it's probably maintaining a private market where it is buying Exxon stock at $38 a share, probably buying back its own stock. Alice Little says, with a perfect visual. Kay says, Dow is down over 600 points today after being down but yesterday too. The market must be anticipating a fall. Trump will get very, very nervous if the market keeps on falling. If the market really crashes at this point, Trump will come begging Nancy Pelosi for a settlement. Jim Bird says, currently we're subsidizing my brother and sister-in-law. All they have left after a CEO stole their 401k and Social Security. Evelina says, this is what I mean about vision, literally. Steve DeVore says, people are still driving and need fuel. That's why your stock is up. I don't know where they're traveling to. It surely isn't family. Nobody wants to get their loved ones sick. Fuel prices are very, very low. We paid this past week $1.99 a gallon at Costco here in Northern Virginia. Evelina says, Alice Little, someone with vision, that's all. Alice says, it is absolutely, you should see the tent cities growing under our freeways. I'm so freaking grateful I own my own home. Evelina says, it's pathetic. Steve says, are you in California? Jim Bird says, Democrats only fight Republican presidents. However, in Iowa, I have no reason to vote for either corrupt arses because Trump is clearly winning. Trump is winning in Iowa? Is that what the polls are showing? I don't know. I didn't think I was reading that in the polls. I thought that it was pretty closely tied, in Iowa. Alvaro says they're driving to the liquor stores and weed dope dealers. Alice says, Stephen, I'm in Austin, Texas. Oh, so you're right near Jamie, right? Barbara says, I want Wall Street to trash spectacularly. I want the rich to feel this. Please, God, let them feel this. Steve says, a new study says more than 250,000 COVID-19 cases between August 2nd and September 2nd came from the Sturgis rally. My God, 250,000 cases? That's wild, just from one rally. That's approximately 19% of all U.S. cases added last month. The paper's authors also concluded the rally resulted in $12.2 billion in public health costs. Trump death count, 194,011. I think it's even more than that, according to the Worldometer site. What I'm seeing right now on that site is 193,652, but that may not be right. I got to get a refresher on this page. It's too late for that to be right. I say too late in the day. It must be more. Nope, it still says 194,032. I think they must have stopped counting the last few days. Anyway, back to the comment string. 194,011. Steve says, funny, the weed shop is the only time I've been outside. Kay says, I'm wondering if the fall on Wall Street is trying to help force the idiot out now. Alice says, I'm not at all rich. I just inherited my portfolio from my dad when he passed away in 2018. Before that, I was getting very close to living in a tent under the freeway. Please have some compassion for me. I don't want to be facing homelessness again. Even with my home, I still have to pay $5,000 a year for taxes and more than that for the filthy homeowners association fees. I have plenty of compassion. Don't worry, Alice. Geraldine Schoenberg says,
and she read that too.
Biden has no vision. Carmen says, I'm just beginning to read that article in Market Watch right before In Depth came on. Which article? Was it Jamie's article? Was that in Market Watch as well? Steve DeVore says, I believe so. And Jim Bird says, over 85% of all stocks are owned or controlled by the 1 to 5% of wealthy stockholders. Alice says, and a teeny tiny portion of stocks is all that keeps me from the street. Carmen says, Steve DeVore, they must sell food, toilet paper, and soap in the wheat shop to them. Alice says, when Trump looted the stock market, I lost close to $50,000 overnight. It's just coming back, and I will be homeless if the stock market disappears. Evelina says, hang in there. Matt says, why a modest why a modest living wage? Why qualified like that? I don't know. Jamie's funny about some things. I'm pretty sure, though, that he means at least the $15 an hour that Bernie is talking about. Matt says a living wage should be a human right. I agree with you, Matt. It should be a human right. Alice Little says, Evelina says to Alice Little, Alice Little, hang in there. Steve says, my cousin has done the shopping, which reminds me we need toilet paper. TP. Well, Costco had some these past 2 weeks. Here. Alice says, thank you, Evelina. Alice says, so is this what might save us? Kay says, still can't find any Lysol spray anywhere here in Northeast Ohio. We were able to find some Lysol spray here a few weeks back. It wasn't in short supply here. Carmen says, Florida neither, and flu season is lurking. Yes, we're going to take our flu shots on Friday. Matt says, what does it mean to make healthcare the cooperative? I take it he means to make the healthcare providers cooperative organizations and to provide them partial support from public sources. And Barbara Wernick says, you're being duped. Wall Street is fine. Alice is a troll. I don't think Alice is a troll. No, Alice has been here a number of times before. Alice is an economist. And I don't believe for a moment that she is a troll, Barbara. Matt says, why is a nationalized healthcare drastic? I think it's drastic to have 88 million people under and uninsured. I entirely agree. I don't think nationalized healthcare is drastic. And sometimes Jamie gives away a little bit in his statements because he wants to appear to be reasonable. So basically what he wants to say is that, Medicare for all is perfectly reasonable, but this over here, this is a little more drastic, even though he may not really think that, it's drastic. Remember, but Kenneth Galbraith, Jamie's father, declared himself a socialist in the early 1970s. And Jamie has been a strong supporter of Bernie Sanders forever. Alice Little says, I really never understand the Republicans' BS against medical insurance. If they want their overpriced private insurance, no one will stop them from using it. Every person I know in Canada, the UK, and Oz absolutely relies on their healthcare system. Then there are Republicans like my family who say, why should my taxes pay for peeps who drink and do drugs and make themselves sick? The problem with the USA is a serious problem of selfishness and lack of compassion for other citizens. Yes, it is. It's a serious problem. It goes away from time to time, like, during the Depression, okay, and in the Second World War, everybody was collective together during those times. And selfishness went away during that period. But the Republicans built it back up gradually until it was in full bloom towards the end of the 1970s again. Barbara Warnick says, none in Massachusetts either. Alice Little says, you must be a hashtag Russian bot. You'd know I have no troll. I never said anything about Wall Street being in trouble. I was answering someone who said they'd like to see everyone with investments get screwed when the stock market implodes. Evelina says, drastic as in radical given the present system. Alice Little says, I reported her as. Actually, Alice, Barbara Wernig is a very, very nice person, and you should not have reported her ass. Sometimes people get a little excited, but people here are uniformly very, very nice to other people here. We stay together as a community. I vouch for Barbara as a really, really nice person. And I vouch for you as a really, really nice person too. And I'm happy you're both here. And Matt Arato says, a high living standard for a very large part of the population, really? Well, when he's talking about that, a large part of the population, he's talking historically in context. He's probably saying a high living standard compared to, I don't know, maybe Africa. He has an international perspective and a historical perspective. So he's talking about us having a very high living standard compared to other societies, at least until rather recently. I would say for the last 30 years, we've been falling pretty fast in this country, except for the paper value of our homes. Evelina says, do you doubt it? Kay says, not for me, Matthew. Alice Little says, there's no reason anyone in the U.S. should starve or be homeless. There are acres of empty properties, and I've let pounds and pounds of food go bad that I could not give away quickly enough. All of that is sustainable. If only Republicans can stop being robber barons and open their hearts. Empty properties and food sitting in the fields to drive up on prices. Evelyn says, yes, that's a part of it, not the entire picture, though. And Barbara says, tell me how you're paying these expenses. True, Evelina. We do need health insurance for all, and I'd love to see them forgive student loan debt. Okay, Barbara, we don't ask people here how they pay their expenses. Alvaro says, God, hope there's no homework on the articles. I'm having migraines. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to give you any homework on the articles. I never assign homework. We're not in a classroom. We're in a conversation. Steve DeVore says, sadly, it's not only Republicans keeping people from accessing empty homes. This is not a party problem. It's a human problem, Matarato says. This is silly. Biden is not going to go to the left. The establishment took out Sanders for a reason. Okay, Matt. We got to keep trying. We got to keep fighting. We got to keep talking. We have to keep on presenting our case. We are dealing with human beings. This is not a deterministic world. The oligarchs do not always win. Sometimes the oligarchs are overthrown. Sometimes they even face and get the guillotine. Now, I don't know whether that's going to happen with these oligarchs or not. But if they keep on pushing it, eventually that is what's going to happen. So maybe some of them will decide to turn back. Some people with $1 billion or even more than $1 billion have concluded that, and they are turning back. They are supporting movements. They are funding parts of our movements. There just are not enough of them yet. It would be good if the tech giants started getting wise and realize that it's either democracy or their children aren't going to be safe. Alice says, the banks took a royal loss on the 2008 the 2008 real estate debacle. But this is something that is good, not just for rich homeowners. Children should not start life with over 6 figures in debt. Absolutely. Carmen says, Steve DeVore, it's a landowner and lord problem now. Neo-feudalism. Yes, it is. Alice said, they took Sanders out because he's the single member of Congress that works for the people and not special interest groups and corporate donors. Bernie jeopardized the money fountain for both Dems and Republicans. I'm neither. Bernie is the only politician worth his title. Well, how about Ilhan Omar? How about Ocasio-Cortez? How about Ro Khanna, Rashida Tlaib, Jayapal. We got more than a few good ones. Ed Markey has been turning around lately, too. Barbara says, bullshit. Nobody said Trump looted the stock market. What is she talking about? I'm not sure. She may be talking about before. Alice says, the one and only time I gave to a politician was plenty to Bernie. I get solicitations, probably 100 a day from both parties, and I'll be damned if I will give them a dime. I wrote them back and let them know. If they can't get their money from the big corporate donors, then they aren't going to win. Until they rely completely on citizens, they will not get my money. Yeah, well, we give to individual politicians that we like and that we believe share our agenda. That's the way we handle it. We don't give money to the party committees. We don't give money to the DCCC. We don't let other people make our choices for us about where that money is going to go. That money is intended for the candidates that we think are going to fight in order to deliver for us. And if they get a chance, will actually deliver for us. Alice says, Barbara, I lost $50,000 in the stock market the day Trump diluted it. You really need to keep quiet about what you don't know about. Alice, but why not just outline the specific situation for Barbara that cost you the $50,000 and how Trump actually looted the stock market? Because I'm not sure that Barbara follows the stock market sufficiently closely to know what you're talking about. In fact, I don't follow the stock market sufficiently closely to know what you're talking about. And that says, what is keeping any politician from saying anything to get votes? It happens all the time. Alice says, I'll be watching it again since I keep stopping to comment. And Carmen says, how did DT loot the stock market? Carmen says, they'll lay off employees October 1st, thousands according to union leaders. Yes, the airlines will. Yeah, because they were committed by their loans not to lay off employees until then. But at that point, they're going to lay them off. Biden would win big time if he ran Medicare for all. Shake my head. He would. Matt says that Warren is not a progressive, and I agree. Avril says, Barbara Wernick, so they will get unemployment benefits, right? Well, if there are extended unemployment benefits, there might be just the old state unemployment benefits. Alice says, Carmen, he looted the stock market when they didn't announce COVID-19. Ah, I see. In other words, he looted the stock market when he failed to announce there was a COVID-19 crisis. He held this information close as insider information. She says, that's why they didn't tell us until well into March when it was an issue in December of 2019. I thought it was weird. My 83-year-old mom had pneumonia but was not hospitalized. The medical community didn't know. Trump took all that time, so all the Warren Buffetts and Bezos and Gates were able to pull their investments in cruise companies, airlines, vacation theme park stocks. Oh, I see what you're talking about, Barbara. I see what you're talking about. A point well taken, I think. And Steve says, there we go again. Someone is using my picture to send up likes. And Matt says, Carmen, good luck. Alvaro, who is Carmen, says, good luck on what? Alice says, everyone will get unemployment if they were employed and laid off through no fault of their own. They'll get unemployment from their states, but they won't necessarily get any extended unemployment unless there still is extended unemployment. Alice says they should be scourged. Alice says, I wanted Ralph Nader to be president. Evelyn says, haha, happened to me, it's hysterical. Barbara says, yes, no extra 600 though, so hey, good for them. And Kay says, Nader wrote the introduction to Hartman's book. Hartman's book on the monopolies. Matt says, is that his October surprise? Why not just rig the vote or go to war, with Venezuela? Because there's too much opposition in terms, of rigging the vote. In other words, both the Democrats and Republicans will be trying to hack in. So he can't really guarantee the machines will be rigged his way. So he's not going to have just one October surprise. What he's probably going to try to do, Matt, is to rig the vote, suppress the vote, go to war with Venezuela, maybe also go for Medicare for all, maybe start a war with Iran. We're expecting a whole bushel of surprises for October. Whole bushel of October surprises. Steve says, I don't believe Trump now. Why should I believe him on Medicare for all? He lies like I breathe. Yes, of course. Biden is going by the same game plan of HRC's 16 overconfidence delusion. Yes, he is. Well, there's no reason why people ought to believe him on Medicare for all when he comes out for it. But if he comes out for it and he says he's for it and he's going to support it, and Biden comes out for it, and Biden comes out in reply, says, I'm never going to lie to you about it. I'm never going to pass Medicare for all, at all, which is what Biden is likely to do because he's so arrogant and stubborn and stupid about things like that. And people will reason, well, Biden is telling us we'll never have Medicare for all, and Trump is saying he's for it. Well, Trump is a liar, and he lies all the time and everything else, but he may not be lying about this, right? He doesn't really lie 100% of the time. He only lies 75% of the time. So at least I've got a 25% chance with him, but Biden's just told us that I have a 0% chance with him. So that's the way some people are going to reason. It might cost Biden a few points. Maybe those few points will be his defeat. Evelina says, Biden is quite dense. His campaign is probably co-opted anyway. What does that mean? He does run his campaign in some way. He can influence it. He can run on what he wants. Kay says, I've heard that war on Venezuela thing too. Yeah, so have I. Stephen says, by whom do you think? Alvaro says, arrogant to the point, Kay, of obstinacy. I think I had a live stream on that last week. Evelina says, of course it's a lie. Al says, oh, he will do that too if he has to. I'm certain he will rig the vote. Well, as I say, he may not have complete freedom to rig it. Evelina says, Alvaro Mano dense. And Evelina says, no more wars, please. Hands off. Okay, Venezuela. Curious if you will be mailing in your own votes. I think what I'm going to do is drop it off at the local office of I'm going to drop it off at the local Loudoun County office where you can drop off your votes. I'm going to make sure it gets there in person. Oh boy. Okay, guys, this is a wonderful discussion. Here we go. Evelyn says Biden is quite dense. His campaign is probably co-opted anyway. And Alvaro says arrogant to the point of obstinacy. Of course, it's a lie. Alice says, oh, he will do that too if he has to. I'm certain that he will rig the votes. And Matt says Biden will not be moved to the left. The oligarchs did not select Joe Biden to move to the left. No, they didn't. But of course, he's Joe Biden. He's not the oligarchs. He's not even a real oligarch himself. Evelina says, clear as day. Barbara says, airlines will end the mail delivery, vacation income, anywhere, medications. There are many reasons we need people who know what to do. Alice says, thank you for the links. Evelina says, doesn't Federal Express do that? And Matt says, Joe, I love your optimism. Thank you, Matt. But it's really not optimism. It's just fight. It's fight. It's about fighting. Alice says, but the Republicans were cutting Obama's every suggestion off at the names. Can you remember? Suggestion, schmuggestion. What Obama should have done was to have gotten the filibuster before he even took office. Then he would have had 8 votes to give. He could have allowed 8 of the conservative Democrats to vote against him and still won every vote. And 8 of them were not going to go against him. Not in those first few months. He could have passed whatever he wanted in the first couple of months. And once he passed the big stuff and the good stuff, he would have been even more popular. And then no one would have dared to defy him. NSC is National Security Council, isn't it? Matarato says, preach. Alice Little says, I'm in Texas. All 38 of our electors voted for the Trump in 2015-16. Barbara said he wanted to be a hero to the rich. He said it. He wanted their money. Social Security needs to be expanded, not cut. I don't know what their problem is. Well, there are many people who haven't accepted that we're a monetary sovereign and can make our own money. That's one of the problems that some of them have. Some of them, of course, do understand this, but are simply being mean. Kay says, I know Biden's history on votes, but hoping he's changed on some of that. He said he wants to expand SS. He may want to expand SS. SS doesn't buy what it used to buy. He may be worried about that. Rob Rivera says, hey, Yoda, hey, Rob. Steve DeVore says, I should hope. And Barbara says, he won't. He's a Trojan horse. It's a fact. Great regrets coming. Probably. Regrets are part of the game. But meanwhile, let's keep shouting. Let's keep hitting. Let's keep fighting. Alice says, part of the problem is the ancients who established Social Security still cling to the theory that it was intended to supplement income rather than sole income. And it's become clear it's the only income for many retirees. Absolutely. Absolutely. Evelina says, so it wasn't Biden who said the pantry is bare, but I can perfectly see him saying, but we can't do that. There simply is no money. I can see him saying that too. But maybe he won't, because Jared is going to tell him that that's not true. I know Jared will tell him that. He's not going to tell him the cupboard is bad. He may tell him it in a softer voice. He may hem and haw about it, but he's going to tell him the cupboard is not bad. I know Jared well enough to know that. I've read enough of his stuff to know that. By the way, Jared and Dean Baker wrote a book on the job guarantee. Jared Bernstein, I mean. Kay says, my lay heavy is one who died because we couldn't afford insurance. Barbara says it's the power for sure. Rob says, I have a question I'd like to ask you for a thoughtful response. Can you tell me from your point of view, what are your opinions on the media? When I explain this to people, I get the eye roll and the looks or responses that are condescending. Look at me as if I'm so naive, I'm just stupid to challenge the media. So you think the mainstream media lies? Absolutely. I mean, even the New York Times has shown itself lying concerning Iraq alongside so many other things. But perhaps you're giving your educated art. I think the New York Times and the mainstream media lie all the time. They express opinions they know are not so. A lot of the opinions they express are due to the fact that they don't have anything online, that their people are often people who are young and wealthy and who are benefiting from the present system and who are wanting to shape opinion to support the present system. They've certainly shown that with their treatment of Bernie Sanders. It's obvious they hate Bernie Sanders because he was going to upset their apple cart. Barbara Wernick said, the Dems will never deliver. Obama had both, and he voted conservative at every turn. He did. That was Obama's choice. I am not disagreeing with you about that. What I'm saying is that he didn't have to do that. That was his choice. It is Biden's choice now, and the country is in much worse shape. Is that going to mean anything to Biden? Well, I don't know. It meant something to his son. His son enlisted in the military, put himself in harm's way. Why did he do that if he didn't care about the country? I'm sure Trump thinks that Beau Biden was a sucker. I'm sure he thinks he was a sucker and a loser. But Joe Biden doesn't think his son was a sucker and a loser for enlisting to serve his country. So maybe Joe Biden cares about the country. Maybe he cares more than Obama does, or that Obama ever did. Obama always impressed me as a climber, okay, if you know what that means. I never doubted he was a climber, and he only cared about himself. That was apparent after he'd been the president for 2 weeks. But Biden has had a different career. For years, he resisted taking in the big money in Washington till he became the vice president. His main net worth was in his house in Delaware. That's all the man had. He never collected any money. Everybody in Washington was living fat off the system. He was spending money on commuter trains. And his wealth was coming from his homes. The rest of his family was getting rich off his name. But he never indulged in that kind of stuff. Why not? Why didn't he do it? Now, after he left the vice presidency, he started to profit then. But he was a fairly old man then. He probably figured, I owe it to my family. I'll take this opportunity, that opportunity, the other opportunity. I'll profit off my name, okay, and what I did, so I won't have any financial insecurity in my old age. But why did not he participate in the great barbecue in Washington, D.C.? I mean, look at Nancy Pelosi. She did that for years and years and years. She's done that ever since she got into the Congress. Not Joe Biden. He didn't do that. Maybe Joe Biden's a different personality than you think he is. Maybe you've been paying too much attention to recent history. Yeah, I'm probably headed for a big disappointment. I know that. I know that. That's all right. Still, it's maybe, maybe, maybe. You can't be sure about certain things. Human beings are free to choose. Joe Biden is free to choose. He's already made 16 million, 17 million, 18 million. Jill doesn't need all that money. He's probably got a fat life insurance policy as well. He's got a nice retirement if he wins the presidency. That's coming from the presidency, okay, as well. So she's protected. He's protected. The rest of his family has been doing pretty well. So, why not do something for the country? I mean, why did he go into public service in the first place? I mean, what was motivating him to go into public service and to stay in it for so many years, making very little money compared to other people? He was the poorest man in the Senate except for Bernie Sanders when he was still in the Senate, when Bernie reached the Senate in 2006. Joe Biden hadn't gotten into the vice presidency yet. Bernie was then the poorest man in the Senate. I'm pretty sure Joe Biden was the second poorest man in the Senate. Maybe that's how Biden and Bernie became friends. I don't know. The Dems had the House and the Senate and gave in still to neoliberal policy. Yeah, because more of them were neoliberal then than are neoliberal now. They were all neoliberals then. I mean, MMT was restricted to just this very small number of people. There was not a person in the Senate who knew about MMT. They gave in still to neoliberal policy. They did. But it's 10 years since then. People have changed in the party. The party has changed. Alice says, $1.65 a gallon for gas in Austin. Barbara says, both parties bought and paid for. Alice Little says, $199K. Barbara Wernick says, she's a bullshitter, I guarantee it. Barbara says, Alice, I mean. Barbara says, okay, Joe, but the BS, I'm out. No, don't go, Barbara. Stay around. Kay says, I love this discussion group. Carmen says, I was kidding about homework. Alice says, let's storm the Bastille. Carmen says, and take away the designer ice cream. Alice says, you are right. I stand corrected on good congressional members. Alice says, thanks for your advice on giving to individual candidates. I've been stuck on the notion that it all goes to Act Blue. What we usually do is we go to the campaign site of people we're thinking of contributing to, and donate directly to them. If they use ActBlue, well, then they use ActBlue, but ActBlue only takes a small amount out of it. They get most of it, okay, from ActBlue, as long as you're giving directly to them. But I never give just to ActBlue itself. Marvel says, oh, Donald Trump is canceling TV ads in Arkansas, citing money problems. Yeah, there are rumors he's got some money problems. Sheldon Adelson will bail him out, though. Barbara said, I was wrong that Trump looted the stock market. I just said she doesn't talk about what she doesn't know. Well, she might know something about the stock market, but she might not have reasoned through Trump's failure to talk about COVID-19 until he and his allies had time to get their money out of the market, or to put it into safe stocks that would not suffer because of the COVID. I think you made a very good point about that, but you did not explain yourself, Alice, at first. Alice said she's curious if we'll be mailing in our own votes. No, we're going to take them into the office. Evelyn says no more wars, please hands off Venezuela. And as Anne says, I'm replying to Kay of Evelina Ponte. I think Carmen was referring to Alice. I stayed off your lectures and watched them on my own. What is wrong with these peeps that they feel the need to put me down? Last time it was someone else. What's the deal with the complete lack of respect, for others? I think it has to do with Facebook. In other words, there's a thing going on with Facebook and with trolls appearing, on Facebook, and people sometimes read things into what other people are thinking that are not there. Okay, and it's just Facebook. Okay, people will get to know you after time. Okay, and they will stop that. Al says, I like that idea. I intend to call during the election and find out if mine was actually received. Here in Virginia, we can check the database and see whether they received it. Kay asks Carmen if $700 a month, Kay, is enough to live on. Evelyn says Carmen was speaking of Alice. Kay said, yes, I could make it on $1,600 a month too. Barbara says he's half-wit. Who's that? She says, since I became sick so young, if it wasn't for Social Security, I'd be dead right now. I would never have been able to afford my mortgage or food, although living is nice. Would be fantastic if I had enough money to take a vacation once a year to ease my mind and spirit. I don't have enough money by myself to enjoy anything before my cousin joined me. I was sitting here waiting for what I'm scared to think about. I'm glad your cousin has moved in with you, Steve. Evelina says, her mom would be rich. Fortunately, she doesn't pay rent. Kay says, I understand that. Steve DeVore. Replying to Kay, Evelina Pont, I think Carmen was actually referring to Alice. I stayed off your lectures and watched them on my own. What is wrong with these peeps? They feel a need to put me down. Carmen was, I was meaning that $700 a month would be manna from heaven for you, Kay. Alice says, thanks, Evelina/Kay. Kay says, what do you live on? Avro. Alice says, I'm very sorry for your loss. Do you have a solid support system? Evelyn says, I was wrong to butt in, sorry. Case says, not really. Romano says, 0. That is really bad news. I'm very sorry, Carmen. Okay, I'm down to the last of your comments. I think it's time to say goodnight. I think it's time to say goodnight. Kay says you're lucky to have someone to give you a home. Anyway, I'm going to say goodnight. I'll be back tomorrow night with some more interesting stuff. I also wanted to tell you I've released 2 short takes today on my site. One of the short takes was on, I made 5 short takes. So, what were they on today? Bonnie says, old man. My 2 short takes today are entitled, one is a Nobel Peace Prize for Cuban doctors, and the other is Out of the Global Vaccination Pact. Tomorrow, I'll be posting at least 2 more short takes, and by Thursday, if I get a chance to cut a 6th of the short takes, there will be another 2 short takes. I won't be doing a discussion of progressive short takes on Thursday night. I'm going to shift that discussion over to Saturday night because it gives me more time to post the short takes to fuel the discussion. Okay? So the Q&A on short takes is going to be on Saturday. Thursday night is going to be a regular live streaming night. And there'll be 2 short takes posted tomorrow. And I expect to post also another 2 short takes on Thursday. Okay? So, okay, I got a big week ahead. I hope that you will have a big week ahead. I want to one more time share my promo, since it has my Patreon account on it, patreon.com/Joe_Firestone. I'll now stop sharing that, and I will say goodnight and thank you for coming. Oh, Kay says she saw both short takes today. How were they, Kay? Al says, laugh out loud. I'm anxious to see them. Thanks. To laugh my ass off, Bonnie. I think it's a COVID-19 memory loss phenomenon. It's not that. It's just that I cut 5 short takes today, and I had to remember which are 2 of the 5 I posted. Ivo says, yay, short takes take the cake. Kay says, great discussion. Love you all. We'll love you too, Kay. And Kay says, I know a few women living on $600 or $700 a month, and if it wasn't for the bad relationships they've made, would be living on the streets without government support. I don't know which is better, but I feel for them. Kay says, yep, that's me too, Steve DeVore. And Kay says, good, Joe. Thank you, Kay. Of course, I forced you into saying that. Rob said, yes, please do more short takes. I'm doing now 6 short takes a week. I did 6 last week, and I'm doing 6 again this week. So you're getting 6 short takes and 3 long live streams and one live stream Q&A discussion. So 4 live streams altogether and 6 short takes. And Steve says, like button doesn't seem to answer that. Okay, folks, good night. I'll see you tomorrow night. There'll be short takes tomorrow.